Part 4 from the Catholic Mirror of September 16, 1893. When His Satanic Majesty, who was a murderer from the beginning and the father of lies, undertook to open the eyes of our first mother, Eve, by stimulating her ambition, "You shall be as gods, knowing good and evil," his action was but the first of many plausible and successful efforts employed later in the seduction of millions of her children. Like Eve, they learned too late, alas, the value of the inducements held out to allure her weak children from allegiance to God. Nor does the subject matter of this discussion form an exception to the usual tactics of His Sable Majesty. Over 3 centuries since, he plausibly represented to a large number of discontented and ambitious Christians the bright prospect of the successful inauguration of a new departure by the abandonment of the church instituted by the Son of God as their teacher, and the assumption of a new teacher, the Bible alone, as their newly fledged oracle. The sagacity of the evil one foresaw but the brilliant success of this maneuver, nor did the result fall short of his most sanguine expectations. A bold and adventurous spirit was alone needed to head the expedition. Him His Satanic Majesty soon found in the apostate monk Luther, who himself repeatedly testifies to the close familiarity that existed between his master and himself in his Table Talk and other works published in 1558 at Wittenberg under the inspection of Melanchthon. His colloquies with Satan on various occasions are testified to by Luther himself, a witness worthy of all credibility. What the agency of the serpent tended to so effectually to achieve in the garden, the agency of Luther achieved in the Christian world. Note: of course, we have not the least sympathy with what is here said about Luther. Only the Lutherans think that Luther had all the truth, but his was nevertheless a grand work. He was a Christian hero. Had his work only been continued as it began, papists would not now be taunting Protestants with the inconsistency of professing to accept the Bible alone and then following the traditions of the Catholic Church. Give them a pilot to their wandering fleet, bold in his art, and tutored to deceit, whose hand adventurous shall their helm misguide to hostile shores, or whelm them in the tide. As the end proposed to himself by the evil one in his raid on the Church of Christ was the destruction of Christianity, we are now engaged in sifting the means adopted by him to ensure his success therein. So far, they have been found to be misleading, self-contradictory, and fallacious. We will now proceed with the further investigation of this imposture. Having proved to a demonstration that the Redeemer in no instance had, during the period of his life, deviated from the faithful observance of the Sabbath, Saturday, referred to by the 4 evangelists 51 times. Although he had designated himself Lord of the Sabbath, he never, having once by command or practice hinted at a desire on his part to change the day by the substitution of another, and having called special attention to the conduct of the apostles and the holy women, the very evening of his death, securing beforehand spices and ointments to be used in embalming his body the morning after the Sabbath, Saturday, as St. Luke so clearly informs us, Luke 24 verse 1, thereby placing beyond peradventure the divine action and will of the Son of God during life by keeping the Sabbath steadfastly, and having called attention to the action of his living representatives after his death, as proved by St. Luke, having also placed before our readers the indisputable fact that the apostles for the following 30 years, Acts, the book of Acts, never deviated from the practice of their divine master in this particular, as St. Luke, Acts chapter 18 verse 4, assures us. And he, Paul, reasoned in the synagogues every Sabbath, Saturday, and persuaded the Jews and the Greeks. The Gentile converts were, as we see from the text, equally instructed with the Jews to keep the Saturday, having been converted to Christianity on that day, the Jews and the Greeks collectively. Having also called attention to the text of the Acts, bearing on the exclusive use of the Sabbath by the Jews and Christians for 30 years after the death of the Savior as the only day of the week observed by Christ and his apostles, which period exhausts the inspired record, we now proceed to supplement our proofs that the Sabbath, Saturday, enjoyed this exclusive privilege by calling attention to every instance wherein the sacred record refers to the first day of the week. The first instance to Sunday after the resurrection of Christ is to be found in St. Luke's Gospel, chapter 24, verse 33 to 40, and St. John, chapter 20, verse 19. The above texts themselves refer to the sole motive of this gathering, the part of the apostles. It took place on the day of the resurrection, Easter Sunday, not for the purpose of inaugurating the new departure from the old Sabbath, Saturday, by keeping holy the new day, for there is not a hint given of prayer, exhortation, or the reading of the scriptures, but it indicates the utter demoralization of the apostles by informing mankind that they were huddled together in that room in Jerusalem for fear of the Jews, as St. John quoted above plainly informs us. The second reference to Sunday is to be found in St. John's Gospel, 20th chapter, 26 to 29th verses. And after 8 days, the disciples were again within, and Thomas with them. The resurrected Redeemer availed himself of this meeting of all the apostles to confound the incredulity of Thomas, who had been absent from the gathering on Easter Sunday evening. This would have furnished a golden opportunity to the Redeemer to change the day in the presence of all his apostles. But we state the simple fact that on this occasion, as on Easter Day, not a word is said of prayer, praise, or reading of the scriptures. Stay tuned to part 5.